Hello, my name is Russell Myers, independent for U.S. President for 2024. So I just finished watching the recording of the State of the Union address by President Joe Biden, and I'm going to say I had to take a Tylenol after I was done with this. It's like, if you want to watch it, you can, obviously. But anyway, I never understand why these post recordings have to include half an hour before the address begins of Congress just milling around and slapping each other on the back or whatever. But luckily, with the recording, I was able to fast forward through that part. All right, so I'm going to be going with some of my notes on this. I took quite a few notes, so this is going to be a little bit long. All right, so the first thing that you should notice, if you happen to watch any of this, is just how divided Congress is, with the Democrats acting like a cheering section, cheering wildly and constant over and over, giving Biden standing ovations for just things that really don't deserve it. They act like he's a rock star, and meanwhile the Republicans are mostly sitting silently with an occasional heckler in the crowd. But this was a clear illustration of exactly why the founding fathers were against the formation of political parties anyway. All right, so here we go. Biden stands up there and compares himself to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Lincoln, which he doesn't have any comparison to them except for being white and male and president. That's pretty much it. All right, he talks about freedom and democracy are under assault. Well, I'll agree with that. If you want to look at gerrymandering, corporate control of our government and stuff like that. But as far as foreign entities, well, other countries have different systems, and just because it's a different system doesn't mean it's not fair or anything like that. Sure, but we can't, even if we view it as unfair, it's not our role to dictate to other countries how their countries should be run. That doesn't make them our enemy in any way. It's not an assault on us if they run their country in a different way. So this is all just garbage. And meanwhile, we are supporting what? The Israel that is conducting genocide in Gaza, and Ukraine, which they're arresting journalists. Gonzalo Lira was killed. He died under Ukrainian incarceration. 13 political parties have been outlawed in Ukraine, and we call this supporting democracy. Sure, okay, whatever you say. All right, so he goes on and says that, preventing Russia from invading Europe, Western Europe, there is no indication or evidence that Russia is going to attempt to invade Western Europe. That doesn't even make any sense. Europe has got a population of 700 and 770 million people. The United States has got 330 million. That's 1.1 billion people that Russia would be confronting, at least, if Russia went into this alone. So, and they've got a population of less than 150 million. No, that's just not a thing. The Ukraine crisis is another issue. But there's no indication that they plan on going any further than the Donbass region, unless they have no other choice. But there's no indication that they plan on going anywhere beyond Ukraine. Although that's another issue. We'll just say that's another issue. All right, I think it's ironic for any member of Congress or any U.S. president to talk about tearing down walls with what we're doing with the U.S. border. Now, border security is one thing, but to talk about tearing down walls while you're building a wall, that doesn't seem to make any sense, does it? All right, so he says that Trump told Putin to do whatever he wanted. Trump never said that. He did not tell Putin to do whatever he wanted. And let me point out that Ukraine was receiving monetary and military assistance from the United States during the Trump presidency, as they were under the Obama presidency. However, it was in 2018 and 2019, while Trump was president, that the National Defense Authorization Act banned any assistance from being used to support the Azov Battalion, recognizing them as neo-Nazis. Okay? So, anyway, yes, the U.S. was a founding member of NATO. The purpose of NATO was to oppose the USSR, which ceased to exist in 1991. Since then, they have no stated purpose, really. NATO, he says, NATO was the strongest it's ever been because they've added more members, which means that NATO has expanded ever further eastward all the way to the Russian border now. All right, so, but larger does not mean stronger, as NATO has depleted their stores of ammunition and much of their hardware by supplying all of this to Ukraine. Meanwhile, their production, military production, is inadequate for a war with Russia. All right, Biden says we will not walk away from Ukraine. We said the same thing about Afghanistan. The U.S. said the same thing about Vietnam. Actually, we said the same thing about Iraq. How many times are we going to say this? Anyway, no, I'm not going to talk about January 6th. I have no desire to get into that quagmire. All right. Women's rights. Biden never codified Roe versus Wade. He had the chance. We've had over 50 years to codify Roe versus Wade into law, and it was never done by any U.S. president. And I have already stated my position on women's rights, to which I am fully committed. And it doesn't just include reproductive rights. Biden came into office pushing to lift COVID restrictions as soon as possible, regardless of the risk at the time. I have pointed out on my other channel just how badly the entire COVID debacle was handled. So, all of that, it was badly handled. at every level. All right. I have addressed. He talks about employment numbers. I have addressed the false image of employment numbers many times. Bloomberg reported that more than half of the jobs that were created in 2023 were part-time jobs. In December, 54% of the jobs created were government jobs at some level. Healthcare, financial services, and tech jobs, living wage jobs, are declining in numbers, which drives a decline in wages, not just in those fields, but in other fields as well. Yeah, because of competition, it drives down the wages because of competition for the remaining jobs. Okay? It also reduces the availability of services in those fields, which is most critical in medicine, and it leads to more monopolization. All right, he talks about our exports. Our major exports are oil, gas, and weapons. China is now the world-leading vehicle manufacturer and exporter, although many of their vehicles are now banned from entering the United States because their vehicles may be a national security threat. Sure, okay. Let me ask, who are we exporting to when other countries are in or near recession? If other countries are in recession, then aside from essential items, they're not going to be importing anything from us, especially if they can get the same items less expensively and with equal or better quality elsewhere, with the price of U.S. products. Consumer sentiment. He claims that consumer sentiment is high. Really? How about yours? Let me ask that. How is your consumer sentiment? How do you feel about the economy? Consumer savings are at the lowest point in at least 40 years, possibly since the Great Depression, and consumer debt in the United States is at the highest level in world history. Debt default is at the highest level and increasing since 2009. The only thing consumers are confident about is that prices are going to keep rising. He talks about expanding our microchip manufacturing. The largest microchip manufacturing plant being built in the United States using government funding is in Arizona. It is being built in conjunction with Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation. Microchips require a lot of water to make. Arizona has a long history of water shortage. Phoenix canceled the building of a housing subdivision that was being constructed because there would not be enough water to supply the housing and the population expansion. If the government is funding such construction, this takes one of three routes. Either it will be managed by TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation, meaning the profits get exported to Taiwan, which is part of China, by the way, or it gets handed to an American company, making this corporate welfare. Or, least likely, the manufacturing plant is nationalized, making it socialism. I'm in favor of the last because profits would be nationalized also. helping to pay down the national debt and support social services. Nationalizing production also increases national security. Having a foreign entity or a corporate entity involved decreases national security. Understand that? If you have somebody that is willing to sell information, you are decreasing national security. If you build in back doors, say for corporate or foreign entity access, you are decreasing national security. All right? He talks about $650 billion in development, housing development, business development. Most of that $650 billion in development is coming from foreign investors and companies. The companies will still be foreign-owned, which means much of the profits will still be exported. And that leads to further devaluation of the dollar, by the way. All right? I am not in favor of affordable internet for all Americans. All right? I'm in favor of high-speed internet being freely available to all Americans. All right? All Americans should have equal access to high-speed internet. Period. Free of charge. That's it. Thank you. All right? It does no good to expand auto manufacturing if nobody can afford the vehicles. Vehicle repossessions have been on the rise for years. And, okay. All right. Meanwhile, nothing is being done about public transportation. A viable and efficient public transportation system would be the best route to environmental protection and expanded access to living wage employment for the most vulnerable Americans. Is he going to do anything about public transportation? No. All right? Yeah, if you poll, you ain't getting nothing. Period. All right? Unions. He goes into his support for unions, and that's a load. All right? I've stated my position on unions. We should have a national union, not only for workers, but for all Americans. As jobs cease to exist, you can be a part of a workers' union, but as jobs cease to exist, what happens when you no longer have a job? You're not a worker, you're no longer part of the union, period. That's it. So we should have a national union for all Americans. That union should have strong political power. I notice he will not mention right-to-work laws, which should be abolished. He says he's against trickle-down economics. Give me a break. To be against trickle-down economics, you have to be against corporations. He says he's against trickle-down economics, but he's not against corporations. Yeah. He said it himself. In Congress, he represented a state with more corporations than all other states combined. He represented the corporations, not the people. He still does. He's just more subversive about it. Notice that he is not breaking up the major corporations. He places no limits on their growth. Tax rates on corporations are still lower today than they were in 2015. More on that in a minute. All right. Good move on insulin prices. But you should notice that he rescinded the Trump tax cap on insulin prices and then put in a different one, which is actually higher than the Trump cap. Under Trump, it was $20. Under Biden, it's $35. All right? And that's only one medication. Medicare negotiating lower drug prices is good. But what about people that are not on Medicare or Medicaid? A $2,000 cap on prescription drugs is unaffordable. to a person that is making minimum wage. Obamacare is a corporate welfare program. We need nationalized, universal health care. All right? That's my stance on it. Women's health research. He talks about this. All right? So, women's health research funding and has been improving for years. Still, good move to improve federal funding for that research. But he refers to this not as an increase in research funding, but a transfer. So that money is being taken away from somewhere else and diverted there. All right. He talks about lower interest, making houses more affordable. No. Lower interest rates does not improve access to affordable housing. That is not how that works. If that were true, housing would have been more affordable for the past years when the interest rate was near 0%. A federal tax credit for homeowners will drive up the cost of housing even further. Renters will see almost no change. He specifically targets large landlords who violate antitrust laws. That will be very difficult to prove. It will take years to prosecute, and successful prosecutions will be rare. That is far too specific on purpose. Federal financing for builders. That's another corporate subsidy. In addition, much of that funding is going to companies like Google, who are building company housing, which is available only to Google employees. Lose your job with them for any reason, and you will have 30 days to vacate. Google will collect and profit from the rent. Other examples of this federal funding are converting empty office buildings to residential properties in urban areas. This will act as a bailout to failing commercial real estate developers while gentrifying neighborhoods, again, driving up the cost of rent and housing. His model does not impose rent caps in any way. He relies exclusively on market pricing being reduced by supply. I would be more in favor of nationalizing failed commercial real estate in addition to new federal housing development with a rent-to-own model, with prices set at cost over time, with rent set at a percentage of income no higher than 20%. That would be a realistic housing proposal. Preschool. Preschool should be free to all children. So should daycare. If you want to talk about women's rights and improving the situation of the poor and middle class, that would be a major step. On education. 4-year college should be socialized for all Americans, even if it does not involve a degree program. His student loan forgiveness has impacted less than 1% of student loans. He says he wants to increase teachers' pay. Teachers' pay is set at the local level. I mean, while he's talking about giving teachers a pay raise, he makes no mention of any plan on how he would do this. So this is an example of an empty talking point. If he's not telling you how he's doing it, then he's not doing it. It's just talking. Reducing the deficit. He says that he has reduced the deficit. That doesn't mean anything when you keep increasing the budget. It is also a bait and switch when the deficit is simply transferred to the debt. The debt ceiling has been suspended until 2025. The national debt is now more than $34 trillion. He says no child should go hungry. I agree. That's why school lunches should be free. They should also be healthy food. I notice those are words which will never come from his mouth. For the record, I know personally what child hunger feels like. Been there. So it's not a talking point or an abstract to me. He references corporations paying at least a 21% tax rate. You know what? That's the tax rate which was set by the Trump Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. So, he is clearly stating he will make no change. In 2015, corporate taxes were 28.7% average, with a weighted average of 37%. He is keeping the Trump tax cuts for corporations. He talks about a 25% tax rate on billionaires. That's for income tax. 25%. See my tax reform policy, okay? Social Security retirement age. Oh, nobody should increase the age of retirement. You notice he doesn't say he's going to lower it. Yeah. The current Social Security retirement age is 70 years old for full benefits. Opposing raising the retirement age is an empty talking point. How much higher can you go than 70? Seriously, I got a letter from the Social Security Administration last week telling me what my benefits will be at what age if I retire, if I'm able to retire. He says he will make the wealthy pay their fair share into Social Security, but he doesn't say how. He does not mention lifting the cap. If you make over $1 billion a year, you pay no more into Social Security than a person making $168,600. That cap should be eliminated entirely. All of us will believe in the crackdown on shrinkflation when we see it. And we're not going to see it. Imposing a credit card late fee cap of $8 sounds good, but what this is going to do is result in banks canceling more credit cards and tightening credit standards even further. And it may also lead to more bank failures. He talks about this being $20 billion a year. Well, yeah, that's $20 billion a year that the banks have been planning on taking in that they're not going to be taking in, and you run into a banking problem. And we've already got a banking problem. If you impose that during boom years, that would be great. You're imposing it now when banks are already failing? No. It should happen, but now is not the right time. I still say the best way to tackle immigration problems is to change U.S. foreign policy, which leads to U.S. foreign policy leads to increased illegal immigration. Ending the drug war would be a major step. Instead, he is escalating the drug war. He also sounds almost exactly like Trump about immigration policy. It's really only the wording that is different. The Freedom to Vote Act that he addresses. Well, I have addressed my views on voting rights. His talk is pretty vague. Past convicts in my view, should have their voting rights restored on release from physical incarceration, not after they finish paying off any fines, fees, whatever. No, as soon as they are released from physical incarceration, they should have their voting rights restored, including for felons. All right, campaigns. Campaigns should be financed federally at all levels, with equal funding for the top 4 parties or independent candidates. No private donations should be allowed. Lobbying should be a criminal offense. This is corruption. In most countries, this is considered corruption. Gerrymandering should be abolished. All Americans should have ready access to polls. Poll deserts should be eliminated. There are towns here in Alabama that have no polls. You have to go to a larger location to access a poll. Any laws limiting access to polls are unconstitutional, such as making it illegal to drive multiple people to the polls. No, you should be able to pull up with a bus full of people and let them all vote. All right. Speaking about workers' rights as a joke, after placing a federal ban on the rights of railroad workers to strike, once again, right-to-work laws should be repealed and deemed unconstitutional. The president can raise the minimum wage. He talks about raising the minimum wage. The president can raise the minimum wage, but that does no good if caps are not placed on inflation for basic goods. It would do more good to impose a maximum income than to raise the minimum wage. See my policies on tax reform and stabilizing the economy. His environmental policies are weak. He addresses the environment. His policies are weak. Yet nothing about it addresses clean water or food production. Look at my environmental policies. I'm not going to go into all of that here. Marijuana. Marijuana should be federally decriminalized for adult use, and all convictions for low-level possession or use at all levels should be expunged, not just at the federal level. His actions on this affected not one single person. Not one person was released from federal prison, and I don't believe any records were expunged. Marijuana should be regulated and taxed just like alcohol, with medical use legal for minors and medical use. For medical use. It should also be legal to grow your own marijuana with limits for the amount set. For example, in New Mexico, it's legal for a medical marijuana patient to have 4 mature plants and 8 immature plants per patient. That's reasonable, okay? Violence Against Women's Act. This is, all violent crimes should be prosecuted equally. This is pandering. It really is. It's pandering. I have not heard anything concrete regarding gun violence prevention having been done under this administration. Assault weapons should be illegal. I agree. Assault weapons should be illegal. They used to be. You can't say, and they are illegal in some states. So you can't say, I reject this argument that there's no such thing as an assault weapon. Yeah, there definitely is. So I'm not going to get into that debate. Assault weapons and high capacity magazines should be illegal. If if you need 30 rounds to hit a target, then you don't need a gun in your hand. All right? Enforcement of current gun laws should be strengthened and, all right, the conflicts in both Gaza and Ukraine can be solved by ending U.S. support for Israel and Ukraine if they are not taking active steps toward peace. Protecting Gazans and Palestinian civilians means recognizing their rights, opposing illegal Israeli housing developments, and the trade blockade against Palestine. Palestine should be recognized as a state with the right to self-defense. They're not even allowed to have a formal military, so they have Hamas that fights because they don't have anything else. So you tell them they can't have a military. They form an informal military to defend themselves, and then you call them terrorists. That's how that works. All right, there is no reason the U.S. should be providing economic aid to Israel. There's no reason for that. Yemen would not be a problem if Israel stopped the genocide in Gaza. They weren't a threat before, and they've said why they're doing what they're doing. Iran is no threat to us. Russia is no threat to us. China is no threat to us. If Biden wanted competition with China instead of conflict, he would lift the embargoes and sanctions on technology and trade. He would vacate the U.S. presence in the South China Sea. You cannot say you want competition instead of conflict when you are imposing the situation which will lead to conflict. You're causing conflict. All in all, everything about his speech was isolationist, nationalistic, adversarial, confrontational, exceptionalistic, militaristic, Cold War mentality. While he says he's against old ideas, he's brought back the Cold War. And it's all about the economic status quo and using deceptive rhetoric. He has taken us backward, as did his predecessor. It's all marketing. It's not truth. There's no change. It's all, the only thing advancing is more and more warfare, more and more confrontation, and it's all deception. So, there's my view on this, and, give me your views on it. I'm open to anything. Put your comments below. Share this video. Talk about these subjects. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this campaign, and I will catch you in the next one. Thank you for watching. I hope you have a good day.